Welcome to your Lettings Finance training. In this video, we're going to be looking at reporting. That will cover your audit trail, nominal reports, both period and total trial balance, your ROPL 01, NOL tax report, and reviewing invoices. Jumping over into Expert Agent. All your financial reporting will be accessed via the top finance menu and either under the reporting or the review submenus. The first report that we're going to have a look at is your audit trail. So via your top finance menu, you're going to go to reporting and to audit trail. Your audit trail will open and there will be a few filter options at the top. The first one will be to select branch. So if you are an agency who has multiple branches and you data share between those branches, you can opt to look at transactions for just one or for all of your branches. Once that's set, you have your date range selection, which will default to the current month. You can run that report for the current month or change the date range that you're looking at by using the calendars alongside the date from and date to fields. Once you've set your date range, you'll click the report button in the top right hand corner and that will run your report for you. Depending on the date range that you enter and the amount of transactions that need to pull through into your audit trail will depend on the amount of time that report takes to load. So if you're finding your report takes too long to load, you may well find it worthwhile entering a smaller date range in. So once your report has loaded, what you will be presented with on the screen will be any transactions that have been posted between your selected date range. Those transactions will show in date order, with the oldest at the top, following through to the newest at the bottom there. There will be several columns within the report. You will have your date, your branch, and who posted the transaction. You'll then see the nominal that that particular part of the transaction has gone through, with both a debit and a credit amount for that transaction. The type column will indicate what type of transaction it was, for example, whether it was a rent receipt or an opening balance, etc. For any invoices that are sitting within there, the invoice number will be listed. The description of the transaction will show next, alongside any associated records, so either the record that that transaction has been posted on or the property it relates to. And then in the info column, you will see any detail on cancellations. So what you'll see right at the top of my audit trail here is this first set of transactions. This is just one transaction here, which was an opening balance that has been cancelled. It's got a strike through it. So it's been cancelled off of that landlord record, but it still sits within the audit trail as it is a transaction that did happen on that date that has subsequently been cancelled. The date we see here was the posted date, so the date that that transaction sat on the landlord record initially. If I scroll along to the right hand side, I'll see info on the cancellation, so I can see that that was cancelled on the 9th of February. Because Expert Agent works using a double entry bookkeeping system, you will find that there will be multiple postings for each transaction within here. For example, this opening balance here, balance brought forward from previous software for £500, you will see it has two transactions that have made the opening balance, one of which is a debit to the client account and the other is a credit to landlord control. So it's one posting, but because there's a double entry involved, you will see both sides of that entry within the audit trail. A good way for those of you who aren't used to double entry bookkeeping to look at this audit trail is to use this transaction ID on the left-hand side here. If that transaction has the same number, so these two both have the same number here, they are the same transaction. It's just the two parts to the double entry. Similar situation there with this transaction underneath, which is a rent charge of £200. You'll see there's two postings for that. That's the debit to tenancy control and the credit to rent control. This report can be printed out using the print button in the top right hand corner, or it can be exported to a CSV if you wanted to move that information across into a spreadsheet and use it further from there. Your audit trail is a good report to use if you're struggling to reconcile your account within Expert Agent, because it will help you see what's gone on, what's been posted in the account for that period, and hopefully enable you to pick up where your discrepancies or your errors are. We'll close that audit trail down now. The next report that we're going to look at is going to be our nominal reports. Again, accessible via your top finance menu, reporting, and nominal report at the top there. As with our audit trail, our first option on the left-hand side will be to select branch. So if your agency has multiple branches and you data share across those branches, again, you can select which of those branches you're running this report for. The next option you'll have will be the nominal ledger. So as we said when we were looking at our audit trail, Expert Agent works on a double entry bookkeeping system. So for every debit, there will be a credit, and those transactions will move through the nominals to produce your accounts for you. Every nominal that's used within the system, those nominals that are entered by default when we configure your agency, and any additional nominals that you've added into your own configuration will be listed here. You can choose to select one or multiple nominals, and they will all be displayed on this report depending on the nominals you select. Again, our date range will default to the current month, but you can change that if necessary using the calendars. And when you're happy, you're going to click Report. And again, based on the amount of data you're asking Expert Agent to bring back for you, will determine how long that report will take to produce. But once it loads, it may look something like this. You'll see a section for debits for your particular nominal, followed by a section for credits for that nominal. And then any additional nominals that you've included in the report will appear underneath with the same breakdown there, debits, followed by credits. At the bottom of the report, you'll always get totals for the period you've run your report for, so debit totals for the period, credit totals for the period, and then your period balance, which is always your debits less your credits. Scrolling back up to the top of the report there, just to cover off the information that's showing in your nominal report, you'll have the date the transaction happened and the branch and who posted it. You'll have the details, so the description of that particular transaction and the amount, and again the records that that transaction relates to. I've run my nominal report here to look at all my VAT within my agency as I'm VAT registered. So what my VAT account nominal is showing me is any VAT element to my invoices that I've charged for this period. The fact that there are no debits indicates that I haven't created any credit notes for that period. And anything sat under credits will be the VAT element of my sales invoices I've created for that period. You can use your nominal reports to look at any of those nominals. If I untick those three nominals there and just selected my rent control nominal and click Report, what I'll see on the screen now will be any transactions that have passed through that rent control nominal for the period. You'll see within my debit section, I'm seeing rent receipts, so any rents that I've recorded as received for the period of April. And then underneath, under the credit section for rent control, will be any rent charges that have raised for the period of April. Incidentally, any transactions that you're seeing that don't have anyone in the negotiator column, in the posted by column there, that indicates this transaction was auto-generated, so it was raised by the automatic rent run. As with your other financial reports, this can be printed out or it can be exported to a CSV. We close that nominal report down now. The next report that we're going to look at will be your trial balance. Again, accessible via the top finance menu. You've got reporting, and we've got period trial balance and total trial balance. The two are going to show you predominantly the same information. The only difference between the two is that your period trial balance has a from date because you can run that for a particular period, whereas your total trial balance will only have a to date at the top. Either way though, every nominal that is system generated will appear in this total trial balance, plus any additional nominals that you've added in via your configuration. Any nominals where nothing has passed through at all, so nominals that have been added but haven't been used, won't show on this report. Nominals where money has passed through but don't currently have a balance will show on this report, but they won't have a figure alongside them. For example, my client maintenance float nominal here. Each nominal will either have a debit or a credit balance based on what's passed through and the balance of that particular nominal at that time. At the bottom, you'll see a total. In theory, as with every double entry bookkeeping system, those two totals should be the same to confirm that you reconcile, and any discrepancy in the two balances will show at the bottom under that balance heading. Because your double entries are system generated, there shouldn't in theory be a discrepancy between those balances. If you're seeing a discrepancy between those balances, please feel free to contact our support team who will be happy to help you work out why that is. Once this report's been run, either for the period or for the total, you can print it out or you can export it to CSV. If you're unsure on what that balance relates to, it may be a good idea to refer back to the nominal reports that we just looked at for that particular nominal, and it will show you the transactions that are making up that balance. Closing the trial balance down now and moving on to our next report that we're going to look at, which is our ROPL01. This is the report that you will need to use if you've been requested by HMRC to submit a return under Schedule 23. ROPL01 is the name of the document that HMRC will provide you with. Clicking on your ROPL01 return there, again selecting your branches and then selecting your tax year in question and clicking the report button. We'll load for you on the screen a list of all your landlords and their total gross amount due for the year. The format that this report produces in is the format that HMRC require the report in. So all you'll need to do is export this to CSV. Sense check the CSV, run through. You may well have some landlords on this report with zero balances. That indicates that they haven't had any rent in for the period that you're looking at. You may well want to remove those from the report, but that will be at your discretion. You can then submit the CSV that you've exported straight across to HMRC. Next report to have a look at will be relating to your NOL tax. Again, we're selecting branches and we're selecting the year in which we're interested in and clicking report. When the report loads for you, you will see running down the left-hand side your landlord's name and address. If your landlord is exempt from NOL tax, their exemption number will appear in that list there. All landlords will display their rental income, any expenses that have been deducted, and the tax that's been deducted. If your landlord has become exempt from NOL tax halfway through the tax year, they will appear in this report twice, as with my landlord here, showing one balance for when they were subject to tax and one when they weren't. At the bottom of the report, you'll be presented with your quarterly totals so that you can see the balances you should have paid to HMRC for the year, and then a total on the right-hand side. As with your other reports, you can print this one out or you can export it to a CSV. The next report for us to have a look at is our MTD report. Again, accessible via the top finance menu, reporting, and your VAT export MTD. Now you'll be using this report if you're a VAT registered agent and due to MTD regulations, you're wanting to export your invoices for your sales invoices and your credit notes out of Expert Agent across into your office accounting software without the need for any manual intervention. If I open the VAT export there, the screen will open and it will open blank for you. You'll get the option to make your selections as you do with other reports in Expert Agent. So you'll have the select branch option where you can run your report for just the branch you're in or any other branches within your agency. You can also enter your date, so the date that you're wanting to export your invoices for. Maybe you're doing that monthly, maybe you're doing that quarterly. Maybe you're doing that weekly, however frequently you're wanting to export your invoices out of Expert Agent across into your Office accounting software, you can enter your date range in here. You'll get the option for exporting your sales invoices. You'll also get the option for exporting your uplifted purchase invoices. So if you do use uplifts within Expert Agent, so you add a markup onto the invoices that you're receiving from the contractor and charging them onto your landlord, you've also got the option there to export your purchase invoices out of the system as well to go along with the total uplifted sales invoice that you charge the landlord. So once you've made your selection, you're going to click the filter button on the right hand side. An Expert Agent will load for you on an item by item basis. So this will be if you've added multiple items to one invoice, each item will show listed here. Any invoices that have raised during the period you've selected for the branch that you've selected. At the top here in the left-hand corner, you'll get a summary of how the report will be run. So for me here on this occasion, my data will be formatted for Sage and it will be in a summary view. And as it says, this is based on the configuration settings of the selected branch. So when I've gone into my tools and my configuration as the super user, under my Making Tax Digital option under the Lettings configuration, I've told Expert Agent that my financial accounting software is Sage, that I would like an invoice credit prefix of C alongside each item, that I would like my invoices summarized at nominal level, and that I would like the reference alongside each item to be C sales, and for my purchase invoice that would be uplifts. As we have a look at the report itself, we'll have a few columns and we'll just run through them now. So we've got invoice date and transaction dates. That will be the date you chose when creating the sales invoice. You'll have the branch, that's the branch the invoice has been raised in. So if you're running that for multiple branches, you'll see the branch the invoice was raised in there. You'll have the contact name and the contact address. So this will be the landlord or the tenant that the invoice was charged to. You'll have the property address. So again, that's the address of the rented property there. You'll have a column for where the invoice was charged. So that will just give you a breakdown of whether the invoice was charged to a landlord or a tenant, for example. You'll have the description. So that is the item description of each item on that invoice. Then you'll have your nominal code column. So this nominal code column is pulling from the nominal you have raised your invoice against. And this is the export nominal code. So if we just flick back to our configuration there and we look at our nominal ledgers, we'll see in my export code column, for my nominals that I use, I've entered my relevant Sage code here. So here's agency fees, the nominal that's used for all my percentage management fees. I've entered my relevant Sage code in there, which is 4001. So when I'm looking at my VAT export, that code is pulling through into this column for me. If you don't use Sage and you use one of the other formats, obviously when you're entering that information in and you're setting up your nominals within Expert Agent, you want to make sure that export code matches the nominal code you have within your financial accounting software, so your Xero code, your QuickBooks code, etc. We then got the nominal code description, so this is the nominal name. So if that code doesn't mean much to me when I'm looking at it, I can refer back here to the nominal code description and see that that 4001 relates to my agency fees. We've then got the invoice number, so that's your Expert Agent invoice number there. You'll notice that we don't have that prefix there, but the prefixes do pull through when we run the export. Then we've got our amounts, so we've got our net, VAT and total, similar to the figures that we look at in our review sales invoices report. We've got our VAT rate percentage, so that's the percentage of VAT that's been added on, so this figure here. And then we've got our VAT rate code. So these are the VAT rate codes you've entered into your configuration. So again, if we jump back here and look at our financial defaults, what we're seeing is our export description code. So my management fees have been charged with a standard VAT rate because I am VAT registered. The export description I've put in there is T1 because I use Sage. So when I'm looking at my report, that Sage code is pulling through here for me. Last few columns we've got there are the negotiator, so who has created the invoice. If you see any blanks in this column, that means it's an automatically generated invoice from the system, so those will be your recurring invoices predominantly. And then you'll have the type column on the far left indicating whether it's an invoice or a credit note. So check through the information. Once you're happy with that information, you've then got the option to export it. And as we said previous, how that information exports will depend on the settings that you've set in the configuration, and you'll see a summary of that in the top left-hand corner. So I'll click the export button, and that will run that export for me. When that export loads, the file will open in the bottom left-hand corner, as with all your downloads from Expert Agent, and I can click on it there, and the file will be available for me to view. If I just open that to show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's my file. Because I've asked for it to be summaried, we've got this broken down by nominal rather than each individual item. And the report has been formatted based on exactly what Sage needs for that to import. So we've got our type column, the account reference, so that's that reference we put in our configuration there, C sales for me. There's my nominal code, the dates, my reference number, the details, so that's the description of each nominal, the amount, the Sage VAT codes, and the tax amount there. So I can save that file into my desktop, wherever I need to save that, or send it across to my accountant, and that can be imported to Sage from there. If I close that one down, if I just change my configuration slightly, just so I can show you one other export, we'll change that from Sage, we'll change that over to 0. And we'll remove the summarize option there, so we'll ask for it to run on an invoice by invoice basis. If I come back in and refilter, you'll see the option has changed here. If I click my export button now, that will run another export for me. If I open that one up there, and this time my export is formatted exactly as 0 needs it to be. We'll see it's broken down by landlord and tenant because we've asked for it not to be summarised. Each invoice number there, and again the fields that 0 needs to import that. So the important thing with your VAT export report is that you're making sure you're doing your configuration and your formatting first. So you're making sure you're setting up your nominal codes in your configuration, and also that you're setting up your VAT rate codes in your configuration, and these need to be based exactly on what your accounting software needs. So those need to be your Sage codes if you use Sage, they need to be your Xero codes if you use Xero, etc., etc. And then via your Making Tax digital configuration, you can set the format of how you want that report to export. You can view more about that configuration in the introduction video that covers the configuration section. We'll just run one more report down, that's for our uplifted purchase invoices, so we can have a look at those. So if I click uplifted purchase invoices and click the filter button, that will change the report for me now, and I can export. And if I open that file, what I'm looking at here are the invoices that got brought in by the contractor that we then uplifted. Okay, so we'll see them listed here with the amounts that came in from the contractor initially. When we're looking at the report on the screen, you'll see a couple of extra columns. You'll see the contractor pull through here now so we can see. And you'll also, just for your reference, you'll have the sales invoice number that invoice relates to. So this invoice was uplifted to sales invoice number 29 within my agency. If you ever need to see any exports that you've previously run, you've got this View Previous Exports button here. You can enter the date range that you're looking for, and you can click Filter. And any exports with who ran them and exactly when they were created will appear here for you. Next section to look at will be our invoices. These are accessible via the top finance menu and into Review, where you'll have sales invoices / credit notes and also purchase invoices. If we start with sales invoices and credit notes, first option you get with your review invoices and credit notes is to select the branch. You've got a search option for invoice number, so if you're looking for a particular invoice number, you can enter that in there. You can run this report to include cancelled invoices if you'd like to see those. You can ask Expert Agent to show you just invoices, just credit notes, or both. And you can also look at all invoices, only those that are outstanding, or only those that are paid. You've got your date from and to, so you'll enter in the date period that you're wanting to look at those invoices for, whether that be the month or the quarter. These date ranges here are based on the date the invoice was created, Expert Agent works on a standard accounting system, so the date of which you become VAT liable, the date of which you need to enter your invoices within your reporting will be based on the date that invoice was charged, not the date that was paid. So for that reason, these from and to dates are running from the date you raised your invoices or credit notes, not the date they were paid. You can ask Expert Agent to show you a summary report of those invoices or a report in more detail. We'll start with looking at summary and then I'll show you details afterwards. Once you're happy with your selection, you're going to click Filter. And your report will load for you on the screen beneath. You'll see your transaction date, which will be the date your invoice was raised, your invoice number, the description of your invoice, and the date on that invoice. For those of you who are VAT registered, you'll have net, VAT, and total for that particular invoice. And you'll also have a paid amount column, so you can see whether that invoice has been paid yet or not. For those invoices that have been paid, you'll have a paid on. For those credited invoices, you'll have the date that was credited on. You'll see the records that that invoice relates to, the type, so whether that's invoice or credit note, the branch it was raised in, and the negotiator that raised it. Each downward arrow alongside the invoice will give you a full breakdown of that invoice. So if that invoice had more than one item on it, like this one for example, you'll be able to see a full breakdown of that invoice there. Any of these headings can be used to order the report. So if, for example, I wanted to order mine based on invoice number, I could click that downward facing arrow there. And that will load for me my invoices with the highest at the top, flowing through to my lowest at the bottom there. If I was now to filter this to only show outstanding and click filter again, I'm now looking at my invoices that have been raised for April that haven't yet been paid. You'll see at the bottom of this report total, so that will total up each of those columns for you so you can see how much net, VAT and total invoices versus what's been paid. And these reports again can be exported to CSV or printed out. When you're exporting them to CSV, these records here that the invoice has been raised against will appear in separate columns just to allow you to filter that CSV in a little bit more detail. If I change my show to details rather than summary and click filter again, what that will do for me now is show me my invoices in a bit more detail. You'll see I've got an additional column here which is nominal, so I can now see the nominal which this invoice was raised against. There'll be some additional columns on the right hand side too to allow for any invoices that have multiple items under them. So that will include item net, item VAT and item total. This report is particularly useful when transferring your fees out of Expert Agent across into your office accounting. As we said, it can be exported to CSV, so if you wanted to export it out and you have the facility to import that into your office accounting software, you can do. If not, keeping hold of it and possibly just entering the totals in against your various nominals within that office accounting software. Closing that review sales invoices report down and back to our finance and review, we've got a similar report for purchase invoices. First option with this one is to select the contact, so you can run this report to look at a particular contractor, so invoices that have been raised for a particular contractor, or leaving that blank will run the report for all of your contractors. Again, you can select the branch and search for a particular invoice number. Entering your date range and clicking filter will load those invoices for you. Again, you'll be seeing the branch, the negotiator, the contractor in question, the description of that invoice, the date it was raised, whether it's been paid, the total amount of that invoice, and how much of it's been paid, so if it's been partially paid, etc. With the contact records, property records, landlord records, etc. displaying on the right hand side. And that one again can be exported to CSV or printed out if required. That's the last report that we're looking at within this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch.